Can you get lucky in chess? It can feel like your opponents are finding winning tactics in every single game, but you never even have a chance to play any winning moves. I discussed this conundrum with a former world chess champion so that you don't have to. Grandmaster Alexander Kostyniuk told me that it's less about what I perceive as luck, and it's more about just playing strategically and placing your pieces on better squares. When you do that, you will just naturally have better opportunities for tactics. And that sounds so simple. But we know that chess is a complicated game. So today I wanted to share a blitz game with you, which I think is a perfect example of me following Alexander's advice. In the opening, I was very strategic about gaining a lead in development. And secondly, of course, I was putting pieces on good squares, bishops on long diagonals, knights in the center, rooks on open files, and I was utilizing pins to apply pressure along the way. Enjoy the game. We start with e4, c5, and I play c3. And you might be wondering, wait, weren't we just talking about piece development? Like, why are we blocking the knight from going to c3? Well, the idea is to actually fight for the center with d4 at some point. So after d5 takes and takes, I play d4. And yes, black can give white an isolated pawn, but that also frees up the c3 square for the knight to go there. And if you're wondering about the isolated pawn, yes, it's an isolated pawn. It can't be supported by any adjacent pawns because they just don't exist. But it's only a weakness if black can do three things. One is to blockade it, so prevent it from moving forward. Two is to trade pieces down into an endgame. And three is actually winning it. Well, right now we have all the pieces on the board, so I'm less concerned about a potential endgame weakness and more concerned about initiative. And that's exactly what happens after I play knight c3. I am gaining tempo. Gaining tempo means winning time, because my opponent has to respond and react to a move that I made. They have to move their queen a second time in the opening, and already I actually have a crushing move, d5. I did not play this, but the whole idea is actually going along with this theme of development. This knight undevelops to b8. If black tries to move anywhere else, knight b4 gets hit by the giant fork, queen a4, and the knight cannot go back because the pawn is protecting that square. And if you just play here, then of course you lose the knight. And if the knight tries to go to a5, first off, it's already not controlling much of the center anymore. But secondly, it's actually trapped after b4. There's just no square that is not protected or attacked by a piece for white. So for that reason, after d5, white would be in a completely great position here. But instead, I unfortunately played bishop b5. Still a good move though, because it is exerting pressure on this pin. And whenever you pin a piece, you do have to think, what happens if a6? What if the piece can get booted away immediately? Is this good or bad? In this case, it's still good for white because I was going to just take on c6, and my argument would be that my isolated pawn is not nearly as bad as these two split pawns. But my opponent just plays bishop d7, I castle, and now they play a6. And the difference here is that now that the bishop is here, if I take the knight, they don't have to split their pawns. In fact, their bishop would be on an amazing diagonal attacking my king. So I did not want to allow that. So that's why I played bishop a4 with the idea that after b5, I just place my bishop on b3 and I'm on a great diagonal myself. And this is a key point today because bishops on long diagonals, especially diagonals that lead to attacking the opponent's king, are very, very important. After bishop g4, two things have changed in the position. One is that my opponent is trying to remove the defender. What is that? After h3, they can remove my knight, which was defending the d4 square. After I take with the queen, they simply take the free pawn and they're up a pawn, and they are going to threaten to trade off their knight for my great bishop on that long diagonal. So I didn't want to allow that. Instead, I played bishop e3 to hold this pawn together. And now the second thing that has changed is that this knight is now a loose piece. It's not protected by anything. Once upon a time, the pawn on b7 and the bishop on d7 were both protecting this knight. But since then, both pieces have moved. So now after my opponent plays e6 to try to neutralize my bishop, I play h3. And they can either go back or trade itself off. That's what we see. And here we go. I mean, the loose piece is under attack. They have to play queen c7. If you look at this position, white is so much better. And it might not seem so concrete, like it's equal materials. So it's like, wait, why is white so much better? It's because I have all my pieces developed and my rooks are connected and my king is safe. So in terms of development, I've done everything you can possibly imagine to do, except for putting the rook on an open file. That's coming shortly. After queen c7, putting the rook on the open file is already a good thing, but now that it's on the open file with black's queen also on that file, it is even better. Because after rook c8, I actually get to push forward with d5. And the idea is that if you were to move your knight, then I simply get out of the way. And I have some knight takes b5 ideas with tempo on the queen, and it starts to look very dangerous for black. But my opponent actually makes an even bigger mistake, and they take the d-pawn. After knight takes, I'm hitting the queen, so they take my knight. I play bishop takes d5. And now, if you look at this, I have 3 pieces attacking this knight. I am exposing this knight like a celebrity getting canceled for something they said on Twitter. There's just no way for the black to defend this knight, so they actually try to have a danger levels moment, but it doesn't work. They are just playing hope chess at this point, saying, okay, after rook takes c7, then okay, I'll just take your queen with check, and then all of a sudden, black's actually up in exchange, and white is just fighting for the draw. Of course, we don't do that, because I've worked hard to put my pieces on great squares, on great diagonals, and this is what we see. Bishop takes f7. It's a check, and if you take with the knight, then obviously we take the queen, and we're quite happy. My opponent must have seen that, so instead they take with the queen, but now you can just simply take the rook, the king moves out of the way, and by the way, very, very fun variation here. If the king had gone to d7, rook d1, and king takes the free rook, it is actually checkmate in 4 moves. Pause to solve the video to see if you can find this sequence. 3, 2, 1. It starts with queen a8 check. When you go to king c7, we deliver another check. And after king c6, it's mate in 1, supported by the rook. And if you go to king b7, then queen b6 check here and mate. Beautiful sequence. We didn't get to see this because instead of king d7, my opponent plays king e7. And here I still give a check. They block with a knight, and it looks like the knight is protecting the c5 square, but it's not because it's pinned. So I give this check, the king moves forward, and I give another check, and my opponent resigns. Why? The king moved, the knight's no longer pinned. The knight can go and block the check, but now the knight is pinned this way. So even though it looks like it's protecting this square, queen takes f7 is checkmate. In a matter of just 5 to 8 moves, black's position completely crumbled, because if you look at the ending position, they just did not even move this bishop or rook the entire game. They did not develop their pieces, their king stayed in the center. As a product of my lead and development, I have my bishop on a super strong diagonal, my rook was controlling this file, and it produced lucky tactics that ended up crushing my opponent. Even when it looked like my opponent had this nice little counterattack on my queen, it didn't work because we had so many pieces participating in the attack. So moral of the story is get a lead in development, put your pieces on good squares, and you will get lucky and hopefully win your next game of chess. If you want to learn more chess principles and continue getting better at chess, then go check out this video right here. Happy learning, everyone.